everyone, welcome to another modern deck tech. Today's deck tech, Temur Toski of One Mind. So this deck actually originally started out as a Delver deck. Well, at least I wanted to build a Delver deck. So I didn't really have of One Mind necessarily in mind. Actually, the idea came from someone in the Temur Delver Discord who just said that, for flavor reasons, they wanted to build a Delver deck that also had Toski, Bearer of Secrets. Now, it would have been really easy for me to just take one of my Delver lists and take out 2 creatures and add Toski and then call it a day, and it would probably have worked in some regard, but I didn't really want to do that. A, that would have been too easy, and B, I wanted to build a deck that would complement both creatures, and they're 2 very different creatures here. Delver being very tempo-oriented, and Toski not being tempo-oriented at all. So, well, at least not in the traditional sense of tempo. So I really tried to make both work, but I found that both cards really needed a certain set of tools or build around me cards around them. Delver of Secrets requiring a lot of permission and so on and so forth, and a certain level of cantrips. Toski requiring a lot more, because Toski, first of all, is a legendary creature. Let's take a look at the core here while I talk about this. Toski is a legendary creature. It can't be countered, which is great, but it also costs 4 mana, so it's not going to be something you're going to be playing turn 1 or turn 2, even with ramp. And yeah, it required just a completely different deck around it to make it work, and I didn't really want to show you a subpar deck. It's not. I try and avoid doing deck techs on that. That's the whole point. I want to do deck techs that you could actually take and play. So I really tried. I went through several iterations. I'm sure I could have found the proper formula. I'll probably go back to this idea eventually. But for now, Toski, Bearer of Secrets, and Delver of Secrets will be playing in separate decks. So let's see what I had instead. Now, there are Toski deck lists out there. I actually built this deck completely blind to those until after I finished. After I finished grinding and all that, I said, let me just check if everyone's actually done this. And I realized, there are other people who have done it with different variations, which is interesting. But I tried this list out. It worked pretty well. We have 3 Toski, Bearer of Secrets. I mean, you don't want 4 for many reasons. First of all, it's a 4-drop. Second of all, it's a legendary. So, and it's very hard to remove. It's indestructible, can't be countered. So, once it lands on the battlefield, it's probably going to stay there for the rest of the game. So you don't want too many of these. But it really does have a cool ability. Well, it has several cool features to it. Can't be countered. Awesome. So I don't have to worry about it. Indestructible, great. It can't be destroyed in any way. It could be exiled, but it can't be destroyed and it won't lose in combat. It attacks each turn if able. Fine, not a big deal. For creatures coming down late anyway, and it's a 1/1, so it's not really a big deal here. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, the operative word here is whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player. So if you have several creatures dealing combat damage in a turn, you're drawing a lot of cards, and it feels really, really good. You'll see that in the matches today. So what do you play around it? So Of One Mind definitely came to mind when it comes to drawing a lot of cards. And Toski, Bearer of Secrets is a squirrel, which is awesome. What that means is you want to play some number of humans in this deck, which we do. And basically when you do, and this spell Of One Mind costs 2 less to cast if you have a human and a non-human on the battlefield, which is awesome. And then you get to draw 2 cards for 1 mana, which is awesome. In a deck where you're already drawing a lot of cards into a lot of gas, that's really, really helpful. So Of One Mind has just been beautiful and stellar. And by the way, even hard casting it for 3 CMC is not the end of the world if you want to be able to draw 2 cards. It really isn't. So really awesome card. I think it would go hand in hand in a deck that's playing Toski, Bearer of Secrets. And then that leads off into Young Pyromancer, which I think is also very core to this deck, because every time you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. So Young Pyromancer in and of itself creates the conditions for you to cast Of One Mind for 1 blue mana. So that's very, very good. And of course you want many of those little tokens to either be blockers or to be attackers. And with Toski on the battlefield, that means you could have many little tokens attacking in, pinging at your opponent, and you're drawing free cards out of them, which is just, fantastic. And then we have Curious Obsession. Now, Curious Obsession it's an awesome card. I know a lot of you know that. This card in this deck gets you some insane plays, or I should say insane attacks. So let's read this card. It's an enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, which is awesome, by the way, and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And at the beginning of your end step, if you didn't attack with a creature this turn, sacrifice Curious Obsession. So first of all, you're not going to be casting this in the same turn you've cast your other first creature, because you're going to have to sacrifice it right away. Don't make that mistake. But you could cast it next turn and attach it to basically any creature in this deck will work. I think I've even attached it to a token once. But you could attach it to Young Pyromancer. Ideally, you're attaching it to Toski, Bearer of Secrets, because it kind of even forces your opponents even more to block it. But then if they block it, all your other creatures are going to attack through. So that's really something they're going to have to juggle with. And by the way, multiple Curious Obsessions just makes things so much stupider. So you'll see a match, I believe is being posted today, where I have Toski, Bearer of Secrets on the battlefield. I have 2 Curious Obsessions attached to it. And every time it's attacking in, my opponent has no choice, can't block. And every time it's attacking in, I'm drawing like 4 cards. It's something insane like that. I don't remember exactly. You're just drawing so much gas, and it's so great because you're just going to draw into more threats, more burn spells, more whatever. And yeah, Curious Obsession works fantastic in this deck. It's almost a 4 of, and I wouldn't even remove any number when you're sideboarding in cards. That's how good this card is. And how well it plays with the rest of the deck. So this is what I would consider the core of the deck. But we also have other creatures. So Noble Hierarch is there, well, for ramp, really, more than anything else. But the Exalted Trigger is also quite relevant, especially early in the game, being able to give your Young Pyromancer, for example, a bit more of a butt when it's attacking in, so you could potentially survive combat. Or just giving your 1/1 tokens 2/2, and attacking in for more than what they normally would, which is very important as well. So the Exalted Trigger has a lot of importance here, and I think it works really well. But also the ability for you to ramp is also really important, especially if you want to get Toski on the battlefield as soon as possible. Tarmogoyf, well, I mean, it's Tarmogoyf, and you do have enchantments in this deck, which means you have a good chance of getting Tarmogoyf to be pretty big with Curious Obsession, but that's not really why it's there. It's just that's just a side effect. I mean, Tarmogoyf is still a very strong creature. It works really well in a deck like this. A nice big butt. To just kind of maybe stay back as your little creatures attack in, or vice versa. It really doesn't matter, but I really love Tarmogoyf here. And Dreadhorde Arcanist, I haven't seen anyone run this. So Dreadhorde Arcanist is actually great in a deck like this. You're casting a bunch of cantrips that are, a lot of them are 1 CMC. You're casting removal, that's 1 CMC. You can make Dreadhorde Arcanist bigger with Curious Obsession, which I've done. So it becomes a 2/4, and all of a sudden you could now start targeting your 2 CMC spells. If you have multiple, and if you're playing a game where you could have multiple Curious Obsessions attached to Dreadhorde Arcanist, then Dreadhorde could basically target any spell in your graveyard. Yeah, Dreadhorde Arcanist works really well here, puts a lot of pressure, and ensures that you're not just stuck dirtling around, drawing cards, and not necessarily being able to do anything, because maybe, things aren't aligning. So, you could bolt your opponent, and then attack with Dreadhorde Arcanist, and bolt your opponent again. A very nice sequence to have with Dreadhorde Arcanist in Modern. And you just keep putting pressure and pressure and pressure on your opponent. You have a lot of little tokens attacking in. That's more pressure. You're drawing a lot of cards every time you're attacking. That's the goal, which is allowing you to fill up your hand, to have even more pressure and more gas. So Dreadhorde Arcanist really nicely rounds out this deck. At least that's what I found in my testing. So I really like Dreadhorde Arcanist here. It has just enough targets in the deck at 1 CMC to make it playable. And remember, you don't need that many targets. You just need a bolt or 2, and then the game is probably over if you've cast 2 free bolts off of Dreadhorde Arcanist. So just keep that in mind. I really loved it in this deck. It worked really well. So next are the cantrips. So we're playing Of One Mind, which is a cantrip, of course, but we're also, and Curious Obsession is not really a cantrip, but it allows you to draw cards, but yeah, whatever. We're also playing Serum Visions, which of course we are. I mean, I looked at Sleight of Hand and Op, but I think Serum Visions is probably the better option overall, just to be able to draw a card and, get rid of 2 other cards that you might not want to draw into. So, nice little cantrip to have. Removal, I'm playing 4 Lightning Bolt. I'm playing 1 removal card, but it's 4 copies of it. Lightning Bolt, good old Lightning Bolt. I don't think you need anything else. Just keep in mind, there are new cards coming into Modern soon with Suspend, and you have Subtlety and all that coming in. Those are cards I'll have to reevaluate, but they're cards that may take the sideboard slots in this deck as opposed to the main board. So that's just something to keep in mind. Same for the permissions. So here I'm playing Mana Leak. Mana Leak would almost 100% be turned into a counterspell. and I would still play 4 Force of Negation. But Mana Leak almost certainly would become Counterspell, and yeah, that's that. I think it works fine that way. It's very easy to get double blue here, so yeah, Mana Leak is going to go bye-bye, but obviously this was being tested before Modern Horizons 2 went live, so Mana Leak it is. And 4 Force of Negation, because Force of Negation is awesome. So the lands, pretty straightforward here, nothing crazy. I am playing 1 Botanical Sanctum, and I believe I'm playing 20 lands total, but nothing too... No, sorry, I'm not playing 20 lands, I think I'm playing 17. But yeah, nothing too crazy here in terms of lands. You are also having Noble Hierarch as a ramp. So yeah, I mean, let me know if you have any questions in the comment section down below about any of these lands, but pretty straightforward, works really well with the deck. Sideboard, so 3 Veil of Summer, 2 Clothes God of Destiny for some life gain when you need it, and some extra Graveyard Hate. Also playing 1 Grafdigger's Cage, and 2 Surgical Extractions for more Graveyard Hate. Graveyard strategies seem to be coming back in Modern Horizons 2, so until the dust settles with a new meta, probably a good idea to bring in some extra Graveyard Hate just to see what decks might explode, and if we notice that Graveyard strategies are going nowhere, you could start removing them again from your sideboard. Engineer Explosives, still a pretty safe sweeper to get rid of, not only tokens, but any kind of permanent that you weren't able to remove otherwise. Blood Moon, well, you could play Blood Moon really easily in this deck, although with Counterspell, I might change Blood Moon to something else, because getting double blue and also wanting to play Blood Moon as early as possible, not the easiest thing in the world in a 3-color deck. So I might change Blood Moon for Alpine Moon or Cleansing Wildfire to get more draw. We'll see. But yeah, for now, Blood Moon worked in this deck. And last but not least, a Braid for some artifact removal and some added creature removal as well. So the matchups, well, when it comes to combo, I mean, you're gonna have Counterspell, but let me just look at this deck through the list that I'm presenting to you right now, and not a list I haven't tested with yet technically, although we all know what would happen with Counterspell. It would just make Mana Leak gone and you'd have a hard counter. But let's just look at spell-based combos. So if you're playing against Storm or I guess technically through the Breach, but it's not completely spell-based, you're going to have to rely on your permission package and make sure you remove their threats as early as possible. I mean, it's really a similar strategy to a lot of the Temur decks that I have here. If you can slow them down enough with early removal and permission, you might be able to have enough momentum to attack them in enough times and take them out. Might be a bit difficult. It would be nice to have a bit more permission on your side, but again, 4 Mana Leak, 4 Force of Negation, that's quite a bit, and you can put on early pressure as well and just keep attacking in, because they're not really going to block unless they could block safely, so you could attack in pretty consistently. I would probably remove Toski, Bearer of Secrets in Game 2 and Game 3 against spell-based combo, especially against Storm, only because it's really way too slow. Even if you slow things down, Toski's probably way too slow, and that would free up some space for other hate cards in your sideboard. For creature-based combo decks or whatever primetime decks, Blood Moon will be useful. You could bring in other types of removal on the side, but your main should be able to deal with it quite well, if you keep up your Mana Leaks and your Force of Negations for the right time, keeping in mind that they're also going to be playing Cavern of Souls, so Blood Moon is going to be a card you're going to have to lean heavy on, and hopefully you draw really, really well early on. I mean, this deck can be very explosive, especially once you start getting the draw engine going, because then your hand is never empty and you always have more and more gas. But if it does stumble a bit, then you might have a hard time recovering from that. So I wouldn't say that combo decks are necessarily your best matchup with the creature base that you have here, but I think you can get through it with enough iterations and enough support from your sideboard. Too much about combo. Aggro. So aggro, you do have some removal, not as much as I'm used to necessarily overall, but you also have a Braid in the side, which is why I have it there, Engineered Explosives. So in games 2 and game 3, assuming game 1 went poorly, you have a better chance with the sideboard support. You do generate a lot of creatures here, especially if you have an early young Pyromancer and it survives, if it sticks. you will be generating a lot of tokens, which is going to be causing a lot of headaches for your aggro opponents. And once you put on Toski Bearer of Secrets and it's attacking in, you know, whether they block it or not, it's going to be an issue for them, because if they don't block it, you're going to start gaining, you know, you're going to start getting card draw. And if they do block it, you know, they might start losing a certain amount of creatures, especially if you get the Bolt, that blocking creature later on. So yeah, it really becomes a problem for them, but, you know, they can out aggro you. And that, you know, I think actually aggro decks might be an issue here, because a lot of your creatures are fragile. I mean, you have Tarmogoyf, and that's your main, you know, big beater, but all the rest are very, very fragile, and that's my main concern when you're playing against aggro. You're playing a lot of Lava Dart and other burn spells, so I wouldn't say it's a very good matchup, but assuming you kept, you know, a relatively strong hand, you could probably keep up with them. And if you force them to negate the right spells at the right time, I think you'll do just fine. I think there's enough in your deck, and there's enough, you know, blocker potential in your deck to slow down aggro enough where, you know, once you get your draw engine going, you're going to be outgazzing them. So that's my take on aggro. Big mana decks. Well, again, you do have permission spells. You hopefully are going to be drawing into a few of them. If you can cut them off an early Karn or an early Ugin, or any early major game finishing threat, you're probably good and in the clear, because then they'll fumble a bit and you'll be drawing into more cards, and, you know, ideally drawing into more spells, more permission spells, and then being able to counter anything else they have in the future, and then, you know, the game kind of goes away from there. In the sideboard, you have Blood Moon, which is important, obviously, to shut down their lands, so that would definitely bring that in, potentially engineer explosives as well. Anything else you think that would help you shore up your percentages against big mana? Yeah, I think it's more or less a 50-50, but you really have to make sure you counter that early threat if they're going to get Tron turn 3. If you don't, then I don't see you getting out of it. It's going to be very, very difficult. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's your best matchup. Non-magic, Dredge, probably going to see a bit more, you know, degenerate decks coming in with Modern Horizons 2. Really hard to say how those decks are going to settle and how to deal with them right now. You know, you do have Graveyard Hate in the sideboard. You're going to have to lean on that. You do have a lot of creatures in the main, and that could get annoying for your Dredge opponent. Because again, if you're creating a lot of tokens with your young Pyromancer, you're going to have answers to a lot of their ground creatures. And, you know, I mean, you won't really care. And being able to draw into more cards and being able to draw into more hate and more gas is going to be beneficial to you. So Dredge might not be that bad against Temur Toski of One Mind. Because of, you know, just purely because of that fact. So just keep that in mind. If you know you're playing against Dredge, keep hands accordingly. Control. So you're definitely going to be annoying for control. Well, first of all, Toski Bearer of Secrets is just going to be a nightmare for your control opponent. I mean, Path to Exile is essentially going to be the only thing they can use, or of one of the few things that they can use, because Toski can't be countered and is indestructible. And once it comes in, you're just going to be attacking with it every turn anyway. Your main concerns obviously are Stoneforge, but this is why you have Lightning Bolt, and this is why you also have permission spells to kind of counter any hard casting of artifacts that you might be worried about, or, you know, winning permission battles as you see fit. It really depends on what variant of control you're playing against. You could bring in a lot of hate in the sideboard against these control decks, so I actually think matchups against control are not that bad. I think they probably start off close to 50-50, honestly, and probably get better with the sideboard. Last but not least, mid-range. Yeah, I mean, mid-range, again, if the mid-range deck really disrupts your hand early on very, you know, aggressively, you're going to have probably some issues recovering. But if you only get hit with one discard spell early on and you're allowed to do everything else for the next couple of turns, it's going to start being a big problem, because you're going to be drawing into a lot of value, a lot of cards, a lot of gas, and they're not going to be able to keep up at some point. And again, as you go wider and wider, they're going to have more and more troubles kind of plugging the holes. At worst, you're going to be at a standstill until one side breaks. And Toski attacking in every turn. Most mid-range decks don't have a proper answer to Toski, so, you know, it's going to be kind of a headache for your mid-range opponent. I think you could grind pretty well against them with this deck, and it'll just get worse for them with the sideboard hate that you could bring in. Yeah, I actually don't mind the mid-range. I think mid-range decks are actually favored for Temur Toski of One Mind. So yeah, just my 2 cents on that matchup. And that's it for Temur Toski of One Mind. This was a fun deck to play with. The sequences where you're drawing like 4, 5, 6 cards in a turn are just fantastic, and they happen more often than you think. It's actually not that hard to get that many draws in a turn, especially once Toski hits the battlefield. But Curious Obsession is just a crazy enabler. And if you're the type of person that likes casting spells allow you to draw cards, this is the deck. Try it out, play it out. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Remember, there's going to be 3 matches being posted up later today, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, notification bell. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, share my content on social media, watch my content start to finish. Go watch another video if you have time. I would really appreciate it. All that stuff really goes a long way. If you want to support me on Patreon, check out the Patreon link in the description of this video as well. Check out all the Patreon rewards and, the tiers. And basically, yeah, the rewards are stuff that I send back to you at the end of every year as a thank you for being a patron. Check that out. Thanks, and have a good one.